Well, Ronnie Chatah is the host of the Beirut Banyan podcast and joins me now live from Beirut. Ronnie, great to have you on the programme again. Clearly, there's a lot of hope for this new development, but is it fanciful to suggest it's months, perhaps years away from having a real impact on the economy?
Well, it's always a pleasure to be with you, and I would go beyond fanciful. I think it's wishful thinking. We're looking at least 7 to 8 years before any profit emerges. And even then, if things go the way they've been going for the last decade, I think you're in for a complete disaster. This money will not go to the Lebanese people. It will go to a bankrupt state that is simply trying to buy time. And that's my humble analysis. And I think any words that were shared earlier by both ministers, at best, it's wishful thinking.
Right, so there's little confidence within the country that any profits from this drilling will have any effect on the greater good.
We're looking at a $100 billion debt. And anyway, the profit mechanism, which is not really clearly stated in the maritime deal, which was outlined earlier, there's no profit mechanism in place. So you're really looking at maneuvering. And this maritime deal took a decade to push through. I think it speaks more to geopolitical realities rather than Lebanese making money. And when I say Lebanese making money, I mean Lebanese people. And I'll give you a direct example. Today, there's a draft law being floated on how to distribute funds if funds emerge from Block 9, which is currently being drilled, or will start being drilled very soon. That whole draft law says nothing about how Lebanese citizens make any money from this whole endeavor. And the way Lebanon functions, it will probably go to corrupt politicians. It will not reach Lebanese citizens. And I think that's the situation we've been in for quite some time. And when I say geopolitical realities, what I mean is a state that has been completely hijacked by a paramilitary machine that is doing Iran's bidding. And it speaks more about how Hezbollah has less concerns with Israel today and more to do with the Lebanese regime and paralyzing it to a point that we're a completely dysfunctional state.
And Ronnie, some months ago, Lebanon, Beirut particularly, was in the headlines on a regular basis for people who couldn't get their money out of their banks and were holding up the banks to do that, some of them successfully. We haven't heard so much of those kind of events of late, but how is life for everyday people? And what level of positivity do they have about the future?
Lebanon is unrecognizable. You're looking at poverty that has reached 65%, and I think that's a conservative estimate. We're a country that depends on fresh dollars, which I don't think any other country came up with that term before, meaning dollars that are not locked in our accounts here, meaning external dollars that are arriving now. People depend on that. Nobody's living a normal life in Lebanon, which is why these two characters that like to spin this news as positive for Lebanon are buffoons, in my opinion. They're lying. And Lebanese citizens have nothing good to expect from this situation unless the basics of political reform happen. That's the message that should be sent clear, which is reform is a prerequisite for profits from potential oil and gas fields. Reform is impossible so long as Iran's military interests are left unaddressed. We're looking at just a few days ago where Lebanon was on the brink of civil war once more. Clashes between Hezbollah fighters carrying ammunition from the Bekaa Valley to Ain al-Halwi refugee camp. Missiles being sent for Palestinian armed militants in a refugee camp. A near civil war breaks out every so often in this country, and we're teetering on the brink always. That's the story. Getting to reform means disarming this machine once and for all. Then you can start to imagine things improving in this country. But prior to that, I think it really is wishful thinking.
Yeah, it is a bleak picture you paint, Ronnie, but we appreciate you painting it for us and we wish you all the best. You can hear more from Ronnie Chatah on the Beirut Banyan podcast.